Well, hello, everyone. For our second podcast episode, 518 Ambassador, a podcast of the International Center of the Capital Region. You can please follow us on our website, ICCRalbany.org. That's ICCRALBANY.org. And you can subscribe to our newsletter there, as well as follow us on our social media accounts on our Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube pages at ICCR Albany. And please make sure you subscribe to this podcast below, and please give us a like and a comment. So for our second podcast episode, we have Holly McKenna. She is the Director of Community Engagement and joined the International Center of the Capital Region in February 2022. She served as the President of the Friends and Foundation of the Albany Public Library and the Albany Public Library Board of Trustees. At the University of Albany, she is also a professional media lecturer and director of the internship program for the English department, as well as the journalism program. She has held a variety of writing and communication positions in the media, education, healthcare, and state government. So I want to thank you, Holly, for being with us here today. And just a little bit of some background info. So the Ukrainian doctors, hospital administrators came to Albany on September 23rd after a 2-day visit in Washington, D.C. They stayed until October 31st. Now, was this at the International Center of the Capital Region? Is that correct?
Yes, and it was actually October 1st. They stayed.
Healthcare facilities and colleges to help them learn more about best practices for emergency medical care as the war rages and affects civilians. They aren't working on the battlefield, but took back information to help those doctors. So thank you, Holly, as I mentioned, for being with us today. I would just like to ask you if you could just explain what your experience was like with the Ukrainians and when they came to the Capital Region. What was that like?
Well, thanks for having me, Fiona. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited about our podcast. I got to have some really special time with these folks. It was like they were, they're like less than 40 years old. Some of them were full-fledged doctors and they were in their late 20s. And now they're hospital administrators in addition to having specialty in emergency medicine and other fields. We actually did have a representative from the Ministry of Health. So he was like a big deal. Young dad, young husband. And it was just really incredible, like the anticipation of them coming. We're so excited. And just this between me and my boss and other people at the International Center and the home hosts that were having them, anyone associated with them, people that were do a meeting with them, we're just so excited to meet them and to help them. And we just, everyone's been saying, I want to help Ukraine. I want to help Ukraine. Well, this was an opportunity to.
Is this through the Open World programs that you have at the International
program that is funded by Congress? It is a program that helps bring professionals to meet and greet people here in the same capacity and connect and network and take that's why they go to Washington at first and meet there with folks, and then they come up to Albany, spend 7 days with us. They go to New York City, and that's how that works.
Mm-hmm. Were the Ukrainians that came, did they come through this program?
Yes, they did. The Open World brings in people from, basically they get vetted through the U.S. embassies around the world, and people for their English and their.
Now you had mentioned that you really had a great experience interacting with the Ukrainians. Were you a little bit hesitant or kind of scared in the beginning or nervous because right now there is a war zone happening in Ukraine, and were you just nervous as to how you could interact with them and sort of help them in a sense?
Yes, absolutely. I felt like it was like a big weight on all of our shoulders, like these people were coming, and they're not the only group. Others will be coming or started to come and be sent to different places. They all start in Washington and then they get to be sent around to different communities. We were fortunate to have them come here because we have a lot of hospitals, a lot of healthcare, education, government, there's all kinds of players that can assist them. Of course, they were in Washington, which is where, the federal government is really what gives money to the war effort. But these folks weren't looking for money for the war effort. They're looking for helping taking care of civilians. So medical supplies, medical connections, medical knowledge. At one point they were given, they met with paramedics, and the paramedics gave them these massive books so they could take back and give to their friends who are doctors on the battlefield, like battlefield medicine. Everyone we met just was able to share like some kind of physical material or link. There's apparently battlefield guides, health guides. Battlefield medicine guides that are translated into Ukrainian that they didn't know about. So things like that they could take that kind of work back. So it was kind of like, we were hoping, we put all these people together for them to meet, and hopefully they were going to be going back with stuff that they could really use. And that was kind of, I wouldn't say nerve wracking. I was excited. I know how people work and network, and people's eagerness to be involved with us was the first sign that they were going to be able to help them. And the other thing too is not just all the medical support. They felt the emotional support from all of us. When they left, they gave me a big Ukrainian flag that they all signed. And some of it was personal comments, and some of it was comments. Thank you, Albany, for the support. Like they could go back and feel very loved and supported and helped, and to continue on with their battle, really, of taking care of people who are so sick and injured in Ukraine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was just going to actually ask that question about, I'm sure that they told you lots of stories that were happening there.
Yes. Even personal stories, like a lot of them, their families aren't even there with them anymore. They've mostly, a lot of families, if you don't have a connection to healthcare or the field, and they're also in the western part of Ukraine, which isn't as affected, although when they got home, they were all getting bombed. So that was very nerve wracking for all of us, like worried about these poor people.
Yeah.
Before we were worried, and not really worried because we know who they are. It makes that personal connection. But yeah, so just even the fact that their own lives have been really disrupted. And they're not even soldiers, but their lives have been, they have family living in other countries around the world to be safe. And that was just really upsetting. And then of course the horrors of war. I mean, and what's really happening on the ground there with what, the civilian population is being subject to. One thing they did bring up was the fact that doctors have been kidnapped and taken to be POWs and have to work on Russian soldiers, that the very people that try to kill their own people. So just a real kind of a very, very upsetting situation. And they were, really were very, very upset about what's been happening, to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, what was that like to just listen and hear these people and their stories? I mean, like, you had mentioned you were just worried for them to come back, like, to Ukraine especially, but like, I mean, yeah, just what was that like? What was going through your head when you just heard all these stories?
Well, a lot of it happened when I was driving, because I drove them. I would pick them up at the van and take them from place to place. So people would sit next to me, and the stories, I shake my head and like, I have nothing to compare to. We haven't had a war in the U.S. since the Civil War, and that wasn't even around here. That was down south, and of course I wasn't alive back then.
Yeah.
Our wars have all been fought in other countries, and the fact that these people are having this in their own backyard, and that, like, in mid-February, they were living a normal life like we were. There's been some problems there, of course, but they have families and dogs, and had school and work and cars and travel, and
they have their own lives too,
parties and all that kind of stuff, and like that all came to a screeching halt. Their whole worlds were upended by somebody who, a government's kind of taking over. So yes, to hear those stories day in and day out. But you know what was amazing? They were so positive, and they laughed a lot in the van, and that was really good to hear. And they talk a lot of shop. The translator was like, they're talking a lot of medical shop back there, and laughing, and just and so that was so good for them. And they that sense of relief they had, that they were kind of out of the bad zone for now. And they knew their mission was to collect information. They were here buying scrubs for people, and any kind of like equipment that they could take back with them, on the plane. As I said, they brought a whole suitcase full of books, EMT books and stuff like that. So they were just really just a great group, and on my heart, and my heart's really with them. Always thinking about them, hoping they'll be okay, and hopefully someday they'll get to come back.
Yeah.
And they of course invited all of us to Ukraine, which, you know, maybe someday when it gets rebuilt. Yeah, the stories were really, I mean, I'm a journalist by trade, and I've read a lot about the war. I've kind of had to shield myself because it's so traumatic. And I feel, you know, it's not just like over there happening to people I don't know, kind of thing, that it's real. It's real, you know, it's real. And it was real to me before these people even came. But now it's even more so. But we did have a lot of fun with them. They did some dancing lessons, and, you know, they went to New York City. They had a lot of nice meals. You know, they just really enjoyed. But they're real doctors. I mean, they're just always learning, and they just loved everyone they met with, and you know, made connections that they could continue on. You know, right now it's emergency medicine, getting through the trauma, but hopefully future, like, they got very excited you have some of this in your audio with the interview with them, that, you know, looking forward. And that's trying to give them, I took them to see the semiconductor at Polytechnic, SUNY Polytechnic, because I want them to think big. You know, you got to think big to be big. And like, that seems like science fiction to them right now, but who knows, maybe in 20 years they'll have semiconductors, and semiconductors are very instrumental in healthcare and medical care. You know, so just to kind of give them something else, to a future, because they're young and excited about their country, and they're not giving up. They're very supportive of the war effort, and it can't be all gloom and doom, or they're not going to make it.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned that you're a journalist, and, you know, you were able to kind of hear their stories and their perspectives, and especially, like, you know, you've been reading all these articles about the war, and it is very, you know, traumatic and traumatizing, especially for people who, like, aren't even there in Ukraine right now, and just reading all this stuff, like, you can't imagine what they're going through. But one of the things as a journalist is you definitely do have to kind of interview people and talk to people, and talk to some maybe people who are just from a different perspective or a different culture other than your own. And you did mention this a lot too, that you also got to laugh with them and have fun with them and go out with them. What was that like, being in that experience of, you know, a culture that you're not too familiar with, a perspective, and you could just kind of touch upon what, you know, you saw and that stuff?
Well, the one thing I remember, I'm actually used to being around a lot of foreign people. I was married to somebody from another country before, and I've also, in college, I knew a lot of people from all different countries, and you know, because I am a journalist, I pay attention to the news in other parts of the world. So I'm aware, and I've read a lot of books about different cultures, and traveled, and, you know, like a whole mindset. I'm very open to that. And like, some people might be offended sitting in you know, we went to dinner, went to an Indian restaurant. They wanted to try all kinds of different food they've never had. They had Moroccan, Indian, Vietnamese, never had any of those foods before. They were excited. I was like, do you guys want to get burgers? They're like, no, we want to try this food. I'm like, cool, because I love this food, and I love this restaurants we have around here. So, but I was sitting at one point with all Ukrainians and myself, and they were like very polite, like, do you mind if we speak Ukrainian? And I'm like, of course not. You know, it's like, you know, it's what you're comfortable with, you know? So I sat there eating my Indian food while they were all talking in Ukrainian. And, you know, and like, some people might be offended by that, you know, and I'm just like, you know, they were including me in certain things, but they got comfortable talking and laughing in their own, you know, and it's like their chance to connect. So I wasn't offended, but, you know, it's just amazing sometimes. Like, they even asked me to have their agenda that we had printed in English, if I could have it printed in Ukrainian for them, you know, and to open that up and look at it. It's like, the letters are so different. I mean, it's like, I mean, I've studied different languages, but oh my gosh, and learning so much about Ukraine and the history and the people and the language. That's been, you know, really, really a real mind opener, and it's changed me, you know, for good. They left me with some wonderful gifts. I have this really cool bag that has, it's in one side is Ukrainian, the other side is English, but it's from the town of Lviv, where one of the doctors is from, and it's lovely, embroidered, and it's blue and yellow, like the Ukrainian colors, a little like navy blue and yellow. You know, it's just, I'm not Ukrainian at all. I was in pictures with the Ukrainian club, you know, and then my sister was laughing, like, oh, you look like you fit in, you know, and it's like just a culture that I didn't really know much about. And if first that I was going to connect with them, and it was absolutely fabulous, from the get-go. Like, felt like these folks would be my friend, even if I wasn't working with them. If I just met them, they're just that friendly and outgoing and welcoming.
Right, right. Well, I think that this kind of leads me to my last two questions kind of
Mm-hmm.
for you, and this sort of ties into sort of your experience and what was it like, is what has this experience taught you, and what is something that you would like to take away from this experience? What is something that you just learned, and what has it taught you?
And thinking about that, it just, it's a big world. It's a big world out there, and you feel like even though I felt like I was pretty international and exposed to a lot of things and stuff, like, as I said, not very much experience with, some Russian experience in my life, but a lot of the countries that were part of the Soviet Union, and that's the Open World program is just for countries that were part of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
We had people from Moldova this summer. Poland, I've always known about. I've known Polish people, never met Moldovan people before. And it's just really like, wow, there's just, and it sounds very trite, a whole big world out there, but it's just like, look it up, spend some time. What is the capital? What is, even when it's not in the newspapers as a war zone, have an opportunity to like find out more about that. Some history, and of course you can't remember everything, but that's the one thing I would say, just to really, there's like 200 countries out there in the world, and even just knowing their flag that they have, and just like basic stuff, because a lot of people know a lot about us, and we don't know enough about them, and that's what I love about the International Centers. Kind of helps teach people in a really fun way, and it's people that might just volunteer to be an escort and drive.
Right.
The interpreter, and they get the chance to kind of meet, a real live Ukrainian. We're fortunate to have a very large Ukrainian population in this area, which I was not aware of as well. We have two groups, a Ukrainian Citizens Club and a Ukrainian American Cultural Center. So two groups in two different towns. And just the pride, oh my gosh, the national pride they have. And yet they're very American,
Yeah.
Some of them are first generation, second generation, but very, very proud to be Ukrainian, but very, very proud to be part of America as well. Especially now they're going to be welcoming refugees from Ukraine. They've already started doing that. So these are, it's kind of like they came as immigrants before a war zone to start a new life, and now they're going to help other people. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank my guest, Holly McKenna. Thank you for our second podcast episode of the 5-Minute Ambassador, podcast of the International Center of the Capital Region. You can please follow us on our website, iccralbany.org. That's iccralbany.org. And subscribe to our newsletter there, as well as follow us on our social media pages on our Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And please make sure to subscribe to this podcast, as well as give us a like and a comment. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Fiona. Take care.